And welcome to another episode of Life Sciences Today, where business and technology and people meet. And we're getting close to show number 60. The show is on fire. In the past 10 months, we've recorded almost 60 shows, and I'm pleased and delighted to welcome Shai Policker to the show. Shai was introduced to me by Aviva Sapir, who works with me and John. And we're going to start, Shai, by you introducing yourself and telling us about what you do and your journey into where you are today.
Well, first, happy to be here, Danny, and thanks, Aviva, for arranging that. My journey is pretty simple. I started as a electrical engineer from the Technion, um, and very quickly went into Medtech, various indication and roles. I did spend 10 years in the US. I did an MBA there as well, and so far more than 25 years in the medical device startup world. And in the last 8, 9 years, I moved to the dark side of investing.
Ooh.
And we are, together with my team, we are creating companies and investing in them. Initially through a micro fund and an incubator. It was called Medex. And in the last year and a half, more or less, through Edge, which is a venture capital fund, doing later stage investments in an interesting model that I'm happy to talk about. But we are also recently coming back to being a venture studio and creating new companies as well. So that's the two roles that we have. So we are investors, but we are very hands-on and spend a lot of time in operations and not just picking companies.
Well, that's a really important part because I think Israelis are notoriously good at innovation and notoriously bad at marketing, sales, and innovation. At least that's what some people say. Although I don't believe that. I believe that Israelis are actually very good at sales. So, so maybe you sort of break it down for our listeners. When you say a venture studio or more of a VC and you're more hands-on, what does that exactly mean?
So a venture studio is, I think, more of a like your typical early stage Israeli medtech development. We like to start from a problem, not unlike, let's say, your typical angel investors or incubator that are waiting for those entrepreneurs to come to them. Here is a prototype, or here is some patent that I invented. Please invest in me. We hardly do that. Over the last 8, 9 years, we've done this maybe a couple of times. Most of what we do is we start with a problem that we get from strategic partners, and we put together a team to solve that problem. So the first pitch is actually doesn't involve any entrepreneur. It involves one of the large medical device corporation of the world, and they pitch to us. They explain to us why this is a truly unmet need, why there is no good solution with the current competition, and here is the size of the market, and here is reimbursement, and they build kind of the lay of the land for us. Usually they would know more about that than us. And we get about, I don't know, something like 8 to 10 of those unmet needs every year. We pick a few, maybe two, three, and we put together teams that would involve engineers, physicians, business people, and we try to innovate together with them. We are usually part of the inventors and create those companies from scratch. The advantage here is that you know from day one that you have a more validated business and potentially even a strategic partner waiting for you at the end of those 1, 2, 3 years of incubation. And it's not like, yeah, let's start and see what happens, kind of things that is sometimes typical to those young companies. The other side is, and I think this is one of the biggest problems today in Israeli medtech, is that you complete those first couple of years, maybe with a first in human result, or sometimes with a bench result or an animal data. And this is not enough to um, create.
Commercialize.
Yeah, the value of that is still the amount of the risking that you have done is not enough to raise like a significant, serious round, and you need some more. You need a few $1 million more to really finalize those clinical trials, to really put together your business model. And this is where we have identified an opportunity because um, today, if you look for what you would call early stage VCs, this is where an early stage VC would come in, would take those incubator graduates that have done a little bit of the risking, they have some interesting IP, and they would invest in them to get them to the next inflection point. There are fewer and fewer of those, and it's amazing to see how I think the VC focus have changed from those early stage to the much later stage of commercial stage companies. And in Israel, you have an even higher bar because what happens is that you need to take if you are in the US, you still need to get to market and you need to show all of those things, but for an Israeli CEO, especially a first-time CEO, to get to cross the ocean, bring the company to run an efficient operation in the US, that even to do the clinical trials, the regulatory pathway, reimbursement, and hire a sales team, this is one of the IIA Israel Innovation Authority manager said, called it the next glass ceiling. It's a huge barrier. So when we put together the fund, and this is Edge, this is the later stage fund, we addressed exactly that. First of all, we said, okay, let's recognize that there is not enough expertise right now in Israel to do sales and marketing and late stage operation in the US. Maybe we can get there. Right now, if I'm looking for Israelis to do sales and marketing in the US, 99% chance I'm going to fail. There is a small chance, but I don't want to even try that. What I want to do is build a base in the US, a bridge in the US with Americans, experienced US medtech professionals that have done this before. They know the complexities of the American healthcare system, and they will help those Israeli innovation cross the ocean, land safely, and not go, smash against a brick wall when they get to the US. So this is where we invest. We invest in this situation where we see a very attractive technology that seems to address a major unmet need, um, but and have done some clinical cases. Okay, so there is good de-risking, and they're just about to. The next step should be in the US, and we say, okay, let us help you. Let you we take you hand by hand and cross this road together. We'll give you the infrastructure that you need to do that, and of course, significant funding that you need to get there, and
Mhm.
help you find the right people, help you get build that. And guess what? What everybody is used to is resource sharing on the R&D to do things in a capital efficient way. You can do the same when you get to the US on the operational side. Inventory management, shipping, running clinical trial, all of that. If you kind of combine those resources in the US, you can do more capital efficient operations and preserve capital when you're still your valuation is still not very high. So my benefit is that I'm getting to invest in those companies at a relatively low value. You would not find the quality of technologies that we are investing in, things that are, our number one criteria. These are going to be category leaders. Otherwise, we don't care. So you don't find those high quality ventures in the US at a single digit pre-money valuation. You usually pay $50 million or more for them.
Right, and here because everybody is so poor that you can get a good deal, right?
Yeah. So you can get those deals, and you know what? You also provide the value for those
Oh,
entrepreneurs
sure.
because you are helping every dollar that they raise from you run like $2 or $3 because of the all the specifics and now we have specific examples. So one of the things one of my partners is US based, experienced go-to-market person that's what she does. She takes those companies and she builds their commercial operations. Everything from SABs, commercial reimbursement codes, whatever it is needed. We have a special partnership with the state of New Jersey. So you have many Israeli companies that would build that collaboration with the Israel Innovation Authority, get those matching non-dilutive funds. But we still do that. We use that a lot. But we also have an agreement with the state of New Jersey, which basically means when we take those Israeli companies, we do a corporate inversion. We keep the R&D in Israel. We don't relocate people. We are, as I said, we are adding those US commercial people in the US. We place them in New Jersey. The state of New Jersey basically doubles our investment. So if we invest, let's say, $1.5 million in a company, the company will get $3 million that we manage through a special arrangement that we have with them. We are the first Israeli fund that got that arrangement. This is mostly was intended for American VCs. It took us only 18 months to reach that agreement, but it's in place. We already deployed that capital. We've done this. We are now doing the second deal with them, and it's a cookie cutter now that it's really like a bridge. And for the Israeli entrepreneurs, they will see that they are able to get serious funding to get to the US and everything that they are missing in terms of their operations. So sorry for this long introduction, but that
No, no, that long introduction is really important because my thesis is based on numbers, and first of all, I think your model is great, and you were at IIA, I think, for a while, weren't you?
we are strong partners with the IA. So the first incubator I worked for, Medex, that I was running, I was the CEO of Medex. This was an IIA incubator, working
Right,
on
right, right.
the older programs where you had this matching
Yeah,
thing.
yeah, yeah.
I think the IIA recognized that that model is not very efficient in terms of creating sustainable businesses because again, it's a little bit of money, it's nice matching, but at the end of the day the company don't get a lot of money, and then there is no support for the investors. There was like just a matching for the companies. And here they changed the program, and now they basically injected $10 million to RGP in the fund. This is their new program. So we still get those, staged programs where you can get higher and higher sums of matching of non-dilutive funding. But we also get funding just for our GP to be able to provide this infrastructure to help our portfolio companies from one hand. On the other hand, they added another layer of size of investment. So in the past, this was, the first investment, the company would get like $600,000-$700,000. There was another, you could get a few $100,000 more. Now you have a program, it's called Series A, where in total you can get something like $5 million of non-dilutive funding in one approval. Starts to be interesting. Now, of course, not every company gets that, but two of our five portfolio companies got it, and that's a major advantage. And U.S. funds look at that and says, "Wow, you have 5 million non-dilutive funding." First of all, they like the confidence that they get, but they also like the non-dilutive funding that those companies are getting. And we like it as well.
And the company and the founder likes it also for
So I
sure.
think the IIA also they go through a process of let's say maturity. They learn from the feedback, that they look at what happens in the market. They see what works, what doesn't work, and I think if you look at that in open eyes, you'd see that some things in the old incubator program didn't work well. Some worked really well. There were some very successful companies, Medtech companies that ended up with a high valuation that came out of an incubator. But there were too many that were not able to raise those next round of funding. I think they helped them by adding that extra layer, by supporting like local investors that will do early stage. So the whole thing and the whole concept of venture creation that we are doing, it fits very well with the IAA now.
So that, that's a great model. So basically, you identify the problem, which is that by giving, medtech companies, Israeli medtech companies, a little bit of money, they basically turn into Walking Dead a few years later because they don't have enough money to cross the pond, to New York, Boston, and San Francisco. And that's a great model for you. So how much money are you managing right now?
So in total, it's about 50 million.
50,
Uh,
five
yeah,
zero.
but yeah, but in terms of first check, we are typically providing somewhere between one and three, and we are
Mhm.
preserving more for follow-on funding. We've done even follow-on funding already, and this potentially can double when we are able to actually use the model and move the company to New Jersey.
So I'm going to throw a couple of numbers at you, and I'm going to say something which I told you before we start. I'm going to be deliberately controversial. Okay,
Mhm. Okay.
so here are two numbers. Okay, when you look at the first numbers, I looked at Byte 51, which came out of Silicon Valley Bank. It was restarted by Matt. I looked at fundraising for Medtech in the past 15 months, and I'm looking at it right now. $5.6 billion, 41 companies, series A through F. I'm looking at the numbers. I'll tell you how many people are employed there. That's like 6 billion, close to 6 billion. And they're already generating about 360 million in revenue, and about 3,000 people are employed. Now, that's not a huge ARR per employee, but mind you, these are still venture-backed companies. Okay, but the insight here is that there's not a single Israeli company here. Now, in the past 15 months, not a single Israeli medtech company has raised venture funding in the US, according to Byte 51.
Mm. Well, I would have, or I can already contradict that.
Yeah, okay. But I'm saying I'm looking at the numbers on Byte 51. So it could be how they define devices. Now, I took this to another place also. So I looked at Amun, okay, which is a big Israeli fund. And they invest a lot in digital health. So I flipped the question around to digital health. So Amun invested at about 1.5 billion in digital health. They didn't return the fund. Now, now, mind you, that in digital health, there was huge peak during COVID. Okay, and yeah, I think the VC, the community, the entrepreneurs, and the community are still kind of recovering from that. They're still kind of like feeling the aftershocks of the high COVID investments. But so I looked at another Israeli fund, which I won't mention their name because the one of the GPs there didn't like the numbers. I said, look, he called me up actually. He said, I don't like the numbers you're saying. Well, look, you can look at the numbers, you know, you invest 120 of your own with all of your partners, the people that you followed and they followed you. You invested about almost 989 in the past few years since you started the fund. Only one company had FDA. Oh, he said, well, we don't need FDA because we're doing digital health. I said, okay. I mean, FDA is my proxy for whether the company is on the way to doing something meaningful and getting traction, but that's just me. And then I said, but well, how about exits? And you have one exit, which was a net loss for the investors. And he didn't really have a very good answer to that. So just to this other fund, which will remain unnamed, but I can mention Amun. I can share the numbers with you. Basically, Amun didn't return the fund on digital health either. Now, um, I then sort of shifted my eyes to the medtech, the device industry in Israel. And here's my controversial statement, which I know you don't agree, and I'll deliberately say it because I know you don't agree with me, which that basically the IAA, the Israel Innovation Authority, by writing a little checks, writing just enough money, giving just enough money to a lot of dirt ass poor Israeli device entrepreneurs, basically, are perpetuating what you would call in Eastern Europe the poor shtetl mentality. Okay. Now, the best example I have the poor shtetl mentality is at my previous company. We did clinical data management and the cloud. We did over 70 clinical trials. all kinds devices, the digital therapeutics, AI, biotech. Guess what? You know how many Israeli device companies came to me and said, "Oh, how much do you charge?" So I said, "Well, we charge, we charge like, a third of what Medidata charges, okay? And it's still going to be like, $2,000 a month and plus a $20,000 setup." And this, oh my God, I said, $2,000 is about my budget for the entire clinical trial. Do you understand what I'm saying? How far out these guys are living in la la land? Okay, $2,000 is too much money to spend on clinical data management. Okay, now, and this sort of reflects the state of mind of Israeli device entrepreneurs. They're in a state of mind that says we have so little money, we can't do a good job on the company. Now, this sort of perpetuates because there is this kind of thing when you're very poor, okay, um, when you're very poor, you don't think you can do anything than sort of like beg for money. And that's when you go to the IAA or to some angels and you beg for money and you kind of limp around for a while and then you become a walking dead company for a few years. And when I spoke to people in the Israeli Medtech system, not you, that's why you're on the program today to show how wrong I am. People told me, I said, oh yeah, like 90% of Israeli Medtech companies are like walking dead. And the reason, and what I'm saying is that the reason they're walking dead is that they're being given charity by the IAA. So the IAA, instead of spending $1 billion over 4 years, would have taken the $1 billion and invested it in US commercialization infrastructure, building relationships, having centers in East Coast, West Coast, and maybe in Florida for aesthetics and places where the action is actually happening. That would be money that would actually enable Israel to create an ecosystem for device entrepreneurs. So a device entrepreneur would basically say, look, I have great technology and you do this amazing ideas. Okay, I know that because some of them were my own customers. And then you say, you develop data, basically taking Shai's model, okay, your model, but doing it at scale instead of writing a little checks to keep people perpetually in poverty. That's basically what I'm saying. So I'm saying that writing checks, little checks to companies to start a company, which 90% of them will go nowhere, doesn't make sense because you should be investing. Again, I'm talking public policy. I'm not talking about, you know, what a VC will make return the fund or not return the fund. I'm saying, in terms of as a citizen, a person who lives here, and one of my grandchildren serves in Shmona Echad, and my son is a Mempeh, so so I have to, we're invested in Israel, okay, we live here, and as a citizen of Israel, I would like to see my government investing in ecosystem and less in helping VCs make more money. Okay, that's my controversial statement.
Yeah, I think there is a few things to unpack here. So first of all, um, I disagree with what you're saying in the current state of mind of the IAA. It might be, I think you are not that wrong looking back, some years ago. But one aspect of the way IAA provides funding, which I think is very positive, is they don't almost ever provide just funding to the company. You need to show matching. And the percentage of matching increases as the amount grow. So, for example, in order to get there, I mentioned they have this, the last layer of their recent program is something around, I may be, getting the numbers a bit wrong, and also the exchange rate is changing, but something like $5 million that you can get in non-dilutive funding. This is a 30% matching. So in order to get that five, you need to show them 10 that you raise from private investors, and they want to see serious investors that are putting in the money. Now, if you're a company that is able to show $10 million in investing, you can use that approval. I have that approval. If you give me your 10 million, I'm bringing five non-dilutive. That's attractive to an investor. I can tell you this is attractive for me. So I think now they are not just throwing, $100,000 here and there in small programs. They have quite a lot of budget, maybe not enough. Maybe that's something that needs to grow
Mm-hmm.
in larger amounts on a per company basis. So and you didn't have that before. Now, so I think the current situation, which is, I don't know, 2 years old, 3 years old, something like that, is better. But I don't argue that in the past when I was running Medics, yeah, the company would get like $700,000 in total, everything. Most of it was from the IAA. So my investor would have to put, and we would put even more money than required. It was like $150,000. The company would get, the remaining part, and they would get like at the end around 700. There is only so much you can do with $700,000.
Nothing.
Even if you have super, super, super efficient.
Nothing.
And
You can do nothing with that, and
exactly.
you can't
So
commercialize a company.
so
I
this is
talked.
no longer the case. And also the incubators themselves were very limited. When I was running Medex, the total amount that we invested over 8 years was less than $4 million.
Oh my God.
Yeah, and we've done 18, I think 18 investment, something like that. So just think about it. It was nothing. Now we were very lucky to be able, we actually returned the fund more than what we raised. Our first company was an exit. We had one graduate that is going to be we have several companies that are at much higher valuations that altogether, if I'm looking at the current holdings of the Medex investors, it's probably over $40 million out of the four that they have. And a portion of that they got their original investor back in cash. So we are in good shape, but I recognize the fact that there were many incubators that were not able to get there. We've done something like 5 or 6 strategic deals out of those 17 investment. So we were doing well, but part of that was because we were not really investing in entrepreneurs. We were doing that venture creation thing
Right.
from the
Right.
get-go. That helped us a lot when we are very, very consistent with that.
So
So
I like your strategy. Your strategy makes a lot of sense. And so, do you think that IIA, instead of doing matching and writing checks, just get out of the money business and spend the $1 billion, which they have like it's 250 a year, right? $1 million a year, and create commercialization infrastructure in the US.
so in a way,
Would Israel as a country be better off if the government, if your government and my government was creating commercialization infrastructure?
So here is the thing. It's in a way they first of all in a way they are already doing that through us because as I mentioned, we are now our fund is getting a non-dilutive grant. The fund, not our portfolio companies, our GP is getting $10 million in non-dilutive fund. What we do with this money, we create commercial infrastructure for our portfolio.
If
They
you do,
now,
you're one out of like, I don't know, God knows, 100 funds in Israel, right?
but here is the other side. I think that uh, in most cases, you don't want governments to create commercial infrastructure.
Why
That
not?
usually doesn't work because governments are governments. I think one of the nice thing about IA that they recognize that they are not the one that needs to do the investment. They are working through a professional private proxy which is incubators, which is funds, which is whatever, and they trust them to do that. They let the market work for them, and they just provide a push with some leverage and matching. So if you're doing things correctly, the IAA will kind of amplify what you're already doing.
I
And
understand. But
and
it works, Chai, it works well for the Germans and the Japanese, right?
um, at the end of the day, you want to be, you look at the free market in the US and you want to, you see what governments does and what the private market is doing. You want to be more like a private. This is a little bit of a philosophical discussion. I'm not sure we want to get into that one, but I think the point of view of the IIA is that they don't want to be the only decision maker. They want somebody which is placed in the market to make the first vote vetting on those companies, and then they will have their own committees and whatever. But so I think if you ask them to create the infrastructure, they would be better off doing that through somebody else. And maybe this will be, if maybe we are the pilot, maybe next year they will do 5 of those or 10 of those.
So,
And
Shai, maybe you guys, maybe Edge is the role model for this idea.
maybe, yeah, no,
Yeah,
hopefully
you're
we
maybe you're
can.
the role model for the idea. I would argue that I would be the first to agree with you that government should not be involved in stuff that a private sector can do better. Because you have committees and you have bureaucracy and politics and shit like that. You have people who are they're in the right party or the wrong party. God knows. And I don't want to. God forbid I should talk badly of anyone right now. And I don't want to because I believe that people like you and Aviva who brought us together are doing God's work, okay? By doing what we need, what we believe is the best way to encourage Israeli medtech to flourish and grow. Um, I don't want to beat this too much, but I would like to see a model which is a bit more focused on commercialization in the US and less about being in the VC investment business. I think that people like you can do the investment. I think the IAA should maybe think about being more in the model of the Export Institute, which the Israeli Export Institute, which is I
Yeah.
think I
I'm
work
part of
with.
that as well. I'm trying to help there as well.
Yeah, and I think that that's a good model, I think. And they helped us with a few deals. I was very happy working with them. I saw that they have kind of like a very healthy kind of approach to these things. And they're very much, boots on the ground kind of people. So anyhow,
So
my objective.
maybe one sentence. I think what you will see is that although many of the kind of you know bleak statements that you made are correct, I think you will see that the current point of view and actions of the IAA and also the investment community is more aligned with what we would like to see. I think people have their eyes on the commercial kind of commercialization in the US as how can we make that easier for Israeli companies. I can tell you that in the eyes of the American investors, they look at the Israeli medtech ecosystem, and there is an ecosystem as a like a large incubator for great innovation. I think if you talk to, I think also the medtech investment community in the US is also quite beaten. There are many failures there. Those that remain, those that has that are around for 15, 20 years and continue to raise the whatever fund after fund, and they are being successful and returning money. Most of them, I think all of them, they recognize that there is something about Israel medtech ecosystem. I'm not talking about cyber and everything that is also well known. Israel is a brand name for medtech. So people are coming here when they can fly, and they are looking for innovation. And they also know that those Israeli companies, regardless of the hardship and the lack of funding, they will do much more with less funding, and that's a benefit. And I can tell you, we are an Israeli fund. We are syndicating practically every deal with the U.S. fund or with the U.S. strategic. So this is something that we see every day. We constantly talk with American investors. They want to show us more innovation from the medical device in Israel. They recognize the commercialization problem, but as long as you have a team that is open to hire Americans, that is open to kind of understand what they can do and what they can't do at this point, I think we see more and more investments coming from the US into Israel.
So
The last thing, really last statement is about the strategics. It's true that in many years ago, the concept was a large American corporation comes here, finds a jewel, they steal it and they buy it and they take it, to the US. That still happens sometimes, but in more cases than not, and even in medtech, you see hubs created in Israel of the large American corporation, and there are few that you can see. I mean, there is Boston Scientific, there is Edwards, I mean there are quite a few of those that are they started by buying one company and they use that as a basis for innovation that feeds the
it's that
larger organization.
right.
So and I think that helps also build the ecosystem.
So that's great. So basically, what you're saying is my data is old. And that and then I'm prejudiced, I'm biased because I had customers who thought that spending $2,000 on a clinical trial was a lot of money.
This is still true, I think.
What? This is
This is
Israel,
still
right?
true.
So welcome to Israel, right? Welcome to Israel. You know, this is your opening bargaining position. What, $2,000 for a clinical trial? That's a lot of money. You know? So anyhow, so I mean, so again, so I mean, first of all, I'm delighted to have you on the show. Um, I'm going to like sort of wrap it up with one last question, which is um, let's walk this back for a second, and I'll ask you a surprise question. What is, in your opinion, in Shai Policker's opinion, the biggest anti-pattern in the Israeli medtech industry?
The biggest.
Anti-pattern. Anti-pattern is something that's guaranteed to fail.
Hmm. Yeah.
In your
Yeah.
opinion, there's no
Yeah.
right or wrong answer. Your opinion
No,
based on
I have an answer to that. I think this will be controversial, and I think there will be many in the ecosystem that will not agree with me, but
good.
I will say it anyway.
Say that
Uh,
good. We want to be controversial, right?
so I think you've seen quite a few Israeli successful companies, or maybe a handful of Israeli companies, in cardiology, in the interventional cardiology. Uh, yes. Um, those were successful. They were very, they made a lot of noise. The amount of failures around those are huge. This is exactly fits what you're saying. One of the problem here is that this is really, really difficult to do to build a company that needs to go through a PMA approval process, needs to do whatever 80, $100 million worth of a pivotal trial and take 10, 15 years to get to market.
Mhm.
It's something that is very difficult by any standard.
Right.
The and I think that because there is expertise in Israel on doing interventional cardiology, there is a lot of activity around it. Most of them, unfortunately, will fail. This is the anti-pattern, you mentioned. I think that there is the opposite side to that, and many of the things that we are trying to do. You can find opportunities which are, the 510K, de novo possibilities, where with $15 million, $10 million even, you can create a company from scratch, get it through FDA approval, and commercialize it. And I would like to see more of those coming from Israel because then the objective barrier is smaller. You know, I think that then you will see more in terms of number of success. The chances of success will be much higher. We have, one very quick example, one company that we have that we invested in Edge that started already in medics, company called Synchrony Medical. They do like an external a wearable vest for COPD, for bronchiectasis, for airway clearance, for respiratory.
What's the name of the company?
Synchrony Medical.
Sync
Synchrony Medical.
Synchrony. Ah, okay.
Yes. It's a home-based therapy. It's basically taking the respiratory physiotherapist that you need for airway clearance, very serious disease, people get hospitalized and basically bringing it to the home of the patient. It's a wearable device. It's a 510K. There was a respiratory physiotherapist in Sheba Medical Center that came up with the idea, wrote a patent. We licensed the patent, built the company around it. We did a clinical trial in Israel, a clinical trial in the US. We did a corporate flip, got FDA approval, commercialized the company with our US based infrastructure. And we got from nothing to the first sale with $2.5 million.
Wow, that's incredible.
Um, this is something that, and I don't think I mean, we were very, very capital efficient, but yeah, maybe somebody less capital efficient would take $5 million. This is still doable. I would like to see more of those. And rather than, you create like a new valve, a new whatever, and you do a few animals and then you try to raise money. And if you are not successful, the company dies. If you are successful, the entrepreneurs get so diluted, and this is when they are super successful raising money and they get nothing. The that's kind of the my recommendation would be. Now, having said that, we are investing in a very, very small, very well selected PMA product. But you know when we do that? We only do that when we have a strategic partner from day one.
Right. So like if Edwards is involved
Like
or
yeah, it
Medtronic,
can be
or Philips, one of those guys.
yes, it can be a build to buy, or it can be something like a more loose kind of arrangement.
And
But you don't have to go and look for the VC that will give you that will really kill you when you go to do every step of the in every step of the way.
no, that's a totally sensible strategy. I know I had a customer, what was their name? Sensible Medical, I think. They
Yeah,
were in the States, right?
yeah,
Whatever
yeah.
happened to Sensible? They're still around, aren't they?
I don't know. I don't think so, but I funny fact. The CEO of Synchrony Medical that I told you about, the CEO and founder, used to work for Sensible.
Oh, okay. Because when you you started to say it's congestive heart failure and it's a
Yeah.
vest, it's a wearable, I said, wait a minute, what's the name of that company? I remember just now is they were a client of ours for cybersecurity and privacy, and so we did that clearance for them way back in the day. It was like
Yeah.
God knows, I don't even remember how long. It was like 10 years ago. So I think they've been around for a long time. So yeah. They're in Netanya. At least that's what I remember.
Yeah, I don't know them that well.
No, I mean I knew them pretty well because I was involved with their I did a deep dive on their technology to do the cyber and privacy. So anyhow, that's a different story. So cool. So sort of it's good to hear that even a company that had a really long runway and maybe they didn't make it to the finish line like they thought they would now has what's the word, a rejuvenation, and what's the name of the company? Synchrony.
Synchrony Medical.
So there is life after death, right?
It's a different life, but yes.
It's a different life, and God, that happens all the time in startups. God knows. So
Yeah.
so first of all, that's a great anti-pattern, and I want to tell you that out of the $5.6 billion that U.S. medtech companies invested, it got raised in the past 15 months. Out of 41 companies, 10, 20, 33 out of 41 are in the cardiovascular space.
Yeah.
Not surprising, huh?
Yes. Yes.
So Aviva, we need to get more cardiovascular companies on the program. That we need to do, because Shai and I both think it's an interesting place, and if there's an anti-pattern there, we need to dig into it and do what we can to sort of like uncover the hidden jewels, right, Shai?
Yes. Yes. We have two of those that we like very much.
So, as you're saying, we'll take this offline. I'd love to have them on the show.
Yes, absolutely.
The show is not only about being provocative and having fun, but it's also providing useful exposure for up and coming companies in the medtech and medtech and tech bio and biotech space. So where technology meets biology meets business, that's where we want to talk to people.
Sounds good.
Amazing. Okay, so again, my name is Danny Lieberman. I'm the host of Life Sciences Today. I've had the pleasure. It's been a lot of fun hosting Shai Policker, who's the GP of Edge, and he's been around the block a few times, and he's proven me wrong a few times on this podcast, which is great to know. And I want to thank Aviva Sapir for bringing us together, and let's get some of those. Let's get two of your companies on the show, and we'll talk about what they're doing to change the world.
Happy to. Happy to. It was really a real pleasure, Danny.
It was a pleasure for me as well, and an honor. And I come at this with a lot of respect for entrepreneurs. I'm an entrepreneur myself, and I had a lot of medtech clients. I know how hard it was for them, and some of them succeeded really well, and some of them less well. So
You learn more from the failures.
oh yeah, I learned so much from it. We had a fintech company that failed painfully back in 2002 or three. I learned a lot from that, and yeah, so we can just have a show on anti-patterns and learning from failures. Cool. So stay safe.
You too.
And let's get those guys on the show.
Absolutely.
Okay. Have a good one. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
I'll let you know when the show goes live. I'll send you in a to go live.